Thank you. Thank you. My wife and I are having a little domestic dispute, and we're hoping that you can help us to resolve it. Danielle here thinks that artificial intelligence is getting out of hand and that it's the biggest existential threat to humanity.
Because it is.
Whereas I can see pretty clearly that it's gene editing, messing with nature and evolution and creating designer superbabies that's actually the biggest threat to humanity.
Yeah, right. Let's see what these people think. Who here thinks that little cute tiny babies are scarier than bloodthirsty killer robots?
Oh, come on. Who here thinks that your smartphone is scarier than unleashing freaky mutant self-replicating genes into the human gene pool? You can raise your hands. Don't be scared.
Ha, 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 ha. Very funny. I like your costume, by the way.
Thanks. Where's your costume?
Well, you know, I thought I could be rogue with the hair, but we are so embarrassing to our kids already. I just didn't think I could pull off the rest of the costume. That was our kid going, oh. But I brought this green cloak because I was thinking, since you are a computer scientist trying to bring Doom bots into the world to destroy us all, you're Dr. Doom.
Oh,
Yeah?
Doom bots. Give me a break. It's the medical community doctor teller that's going to destroy humanity with all the mucking about with DNA, making mutant super babies.
Mutants, Dr. Doom. I hate to break it to you, but the X-Men aren't real, sadly.
Okay, why don't you describe for all of us why you find AI so terrifying?
You watched the movie The Avengers Age of Ultron with me?
You know Ultron's not real either, right?
Yes, of course. But it's not crazy to think that some AI could get smart enough to start to evolve on its own, right?
That's one of the aspirations for some of the work in machine learning, yes.
So it's going to get way smarter than us. Its intelligence can evolve a lot faster than ours. It's not even clear that there's any evolutionary pressure for us to get any smarter than we are. We might be getting dumber for all we know.
But that's okay. The technology is supposed to be better than us at the things that we use it for. You wouldn't want the autopilot on an airplane to be less competent than the human pilot. To the extent that machine learning improves competence, that would be a good thing.
Okay, well, so then what's going to stop some highly evolved AI from breaking into international banking systems and stealing all of our money, or infiltrating autonomous weapons and sending all the drones to kill us?
You've been watching too many movies. Look, there's a whole bunch of confusions tied up in that question. And the first one is airplanes fly and birds fly, but they don't fly in the same ways. And we don't say that one is, strictly speaking, better at flying in all ways than the other one. You know, you're ignoring all that, though, and you're just asking, when will a computer be thinking like a person and yet be smarter than the average person? That's a long way over the horizon.
Uh-oh, I heard that there's a computer that already passed the Turing test at the Royal Society in London. You're the one who's always telling me that Alan Turing is the father of computer science. And he said, we'll know that the computers are winning when they can fool people having a conversation with them into thinking that they're humans. The Turing test is supposed to be the gold standard of artificial intelligence. So there's already a computer just as smart as us.
Again, there's no single definition of smart. Computers are already smarter than us along some dimensions. They're much better at doing calculations than we are. They can remember things much better than us. But to answer your question, a convincing natural language conversation between a human and a computer would be quite an achievement. We are not ready to make Samantha from the movie Her. The AI that you're talking about that fooled some of the London judges in a brief conversation, it was put forward as a 13-year-old Ukrainian boy with a poor grasp of English. So it was a little bit cheaty for it to say things like, why you ask little poor Jewish boy such tricky questions they don't have answer for?
All right, so maybe we're a long way from human-type AI. We might get there one day, though, and when we do, it's presumably going to be smarter than us along a whole bunch of different dimensions. So what's going to stop it from breaking into the banks or sending the drones to kill us?
out of curiosity, why do you think about future AI like a virus? Why not think of it like a network of antibodies that could keep the banks safe? There's so much more work going into helpful AI than harmful AI.
Well, it's because a viral AI that takes over the world's what we're all afraid of, right? I mean, viruses are already plenty scary. Imagine an intelligent virus that could respond to its environment, getting smarter and stronger all the time.
It's easy for you to imagine because it's scary to you, but just because something is easy to imagine doesn't make it likely to happen. Lots of people are worried about their kids being kidnapped by a stranger. But unvaccinated kids who get the measles are 1,000 times more likely to die from the measles than to be kidnapped by a stranger. And yet people who won't let their kids walk to school alone don't get worked up about whether their unvaccinated kids are exposed to the measles because it just seems less scary.
Well, see, measles is a virus, so we should be afraid of viruses.
You're purposefully misunderstanding, but okay. Let's say that this scary AI that you're talking about actually comes to pass and that it's smarter than the average person. By definition, there are already more than 3.5 billion people on the planet who are smarter than the average person.
It's going to be way smarter, like 100 times smarter than any person could be.
Okay, I mean 100 times smarter than one person. I don't know if that's more or less than 100 minds put together, and that seems like a drop in the bucket on a planet of billions. But I'm not even sure that that matters because there's no correlation between smart and being a supervillain, except in the comics, of course. You know, Hitler did not wreak havoc on the planet by being the smartest person in history. He was good at manipulating people's emotions, and he took advantage of this moment in history. These are very human traits. And the damage that we do to the people around us and to the rest of the world, like destroying our environment, persecuting groups of people, voting for someone who clearly won't make a wise president. These are marks of our stupidity, not our cleverness or supervillain skills. Furthermore, what would motivate AI to take all of our money or kill all of us?
Well, if it didn't like us.
So it would be programmed to be a curmudgeon, and its greatest priority would be to see us suffer or get rid of us?
Okay. What if it were programmed to do something really useful, like clean our houses? But then it decided that the most efficient way to fulfill its duty would be to kill all of us. Oh, come on, it's a lot easier to keep a house clean if no one's living in it.
Wow, so now you've got little Roomba robots like random walking you to death. It's not like cleaning robots are going to come equipped standard issue with killer laser beams. What you're talking about would require this long series of super low probability events all to happen. The robots would have to first decide that it's actually not their job to clean, but to prevent mess. Then they would have to understand what death is for a human and how to cause it. They would have to decide that it's actually more practical to dispose of human bodies than to wash the dishes. There'd have to be no safeguards against them harming people, and they'd have to come physically equipped with the ability to kill people. And if every single one of those things happened, it still wouldn't be the end of humanity. 700 people a year are killed by toasters, and we still let toasters into our homes.
Okay, what if it were greedy and it wanted to have everything that we have, so it just decided to wipe us all out to get it?
Right. So it could buy a super yacht and get all the supercomputer babes. Come on, you're projecting human desires onto a machine. Your laptop has no use for your 401k, and it's not envious of your trip to Hawaii.
Well, it's because I'm nice to my laptop. I brought it with me.
All right, assuming that this greedy AI is longing to sail the high seas, how would paralyzing the world's economy and killing all the shipbuilders help it to get what it wants?
Oh, well, the shipbuilders, they will have lost their jobs to AI a long time before, which actually brings us to a more immediate problem. AI is going to take all of our jobs. It's already displaced a lot of workers, and you have to admit this is really likely to get worse. Researchers at Oxford University said 45% of American jobs are going to be automated in the next 2 decades.
45% sounds like a very specific number for a guess like that. But the economy is always in flux. Old jobs are always going away, and new kinds of jobs are always coming forward. In the 1800s, 80% of the workforce worked on farms. Today it's 2%. But it's not like we have 78% unemployment.
Oh, but it's different this time, though. There were plenty of factory jobs for the farmers. Now, if a robot takes your job in the factory, it's not like you can go and become an accounting clerk or a travel agent, because they're all being displaced by new technologies, too. You know the supercomputer, Watson?
Yes?
Well, he's even diagnosing cancer at Sloan Kettering. It took me 10 years to finish my medical training, and he did his overnight.
No one knows how this is all going to play out. New industries are constantly coming forward and offering new kinds of employment for people. Ironically, smart manufacturing, which is partly AI, is being touted right now by politicians on the right and on the left as being critical to saving American manufacturing jobs. If AI makes businesses more productive, that will cause economic growth. That puts more money into the system, which allows people to invest in new ventures, which produces more employment. 100 years from now, there's likely to be entirely new sectors of the economy that we can't even imagine right now that exist then. But is it possible that total employment will fall over time? It's possible. But economic growth will continue as we find ways to do more with less.
Maybe that's true, but the wealth isn't going to the people who are losing their jobs. It's going to the people who make the robots and the people who own the robots.
Unequal distribution of wealth is a huge problem in our society, whether or not artificial intelligence makes the problem worse. The solution can't be to freeze progress, cross our fingers, and hope that this situation doesn't get any worse than it already is. This is a social problem that requires a public policy solution. We can't blame the robots because humans are greedy and don't like to share. And it's perfectly possible to create an environment where everybody wins, like giving everyone a guaranteed base income.
Well, what about job satisfaction and the pride that comes from being gainfully employed?
Yeah, but why not get job satisfaction from doing things that you love instead of doing things that somebody told you to do for money? You didn't give up medicine to become a writer because it pays better.
Touché.
Do you know how many people in the world actually like their jobs? 13%. Most people do not like going to work, and they say explicitly that they want to spend more time with family and friends and on hobbies. So if we offered all the people here the opportunity to have their income stay the same, but work half as many hours a week, how many people here would really turn us down on that?
Even if that's true, I still think that we should proceed cautiously and have regulations in place for AI.
I'm open to that, but how would you define the AI that you'd like to regulate? At its core, AI is really just a fancy way of counting.
Surely people who work in the field have some sense of what constitutes AI and what doesn't.
Absolutely. Artificial intelligence is the parts of their field that don't work yet. Once a computer knows how and is able to fly a plane or trade stocks or read CT scans, we don't call it artificial intelligence anymore. We call it computer vision, we call it optimization or path planning or expert systems. And then those fields create their own forms of oversight and quality assurance. Look, I'm totally supportive of finding ways to build safeguards into the development of AI, but we can't in the meantime just stop all progress because of these hypothetical, far-fetched, worst-case scenario fears.
Oh, but you want to ban genetic engineering when genetic engineering has the potential to advance all of medical science and cure diseases and feed the world?
Yeah. Designer babies threaten the future of humanity by definition. They're going to become the future human race, or mutant race.
All right, why don't you tell all of us how this race of super babies is going to come about?
There's new genetic engineering technology that's just been discovered recently, which allows for precise editing of DNA. So you can basically create a made-to-order baby.
Setting aside for a moment that CRISPR technology is not ready to be used in humans, and it may never actually be good enough, researchers in China tried to repair one single defect in non-viable human embryos, and the results were actually pretty dismal. They had really poor efficiency and a lot of off-target effects. But let's say one day CRISPR technology could be used to rewrite human DNA. How do you propose that we do that?
Well, obviously, we would program the genes for things like intellect and appearance and athletic ability and make the perfect child.
Do you even know what set of factors goes into making someone, say, attractive? The same features can look very different on different people. And as you said yourself, there are many different dimensions along which to measure intelligence. Shakespeare probably had a very different kind of genius from Galileo or Blaise Pascal or Dr. Doom. And even if we could define beauty and intelligence very precisely, which obviously we can't, a much bigger problem is we have no idea what genes make people good looking or smart or good soccer players.
Well, surely eventually scientists are going to figure out what genes make people, say, taller.
It's possible, but it's actually more difficult than you probably think. It's been 13 years since the human genome was sequenced, and a lot of the early predictions look like hype now. But yes, science progresses, and so maybe one day we will know all of the genes that determine how tall you are. That still doesn't mean we're going to be able to mess with them, though. To give you a sense of the complexity, there are over 400 gene regions that have so far been identified to influence height. And that accounts for 20% of the heritability of height. 20%. So that means there are probably thousands of genes that determine how tall you are, and we don't even know what most of them are yet. And then of the gene regions that have been identified, a lot of them don't have a known function. Some of them have functions you might predict, like bone growth or collagen metabolism, and some of them, like mTOR, have dozens of known functions, many of which are actually life-critical. Would you want scientists mucking around in thousands of your baby's genes, knowing that a mess up on any one of them could cause some bad disease, just so your kid could be a little taller than you?
Or shorter. Did you guys know Wolverine is 5 feet 3 inches tall?
No, I didn't. Thank you. As I was saying, that's just for height, which is easy to measure. Imagine how hard it is for something like intelligence that we don't even have a reliable measure for. It's not like there's some intelligence gene. There are thousands of genes that go into brain development, and a lot of them have more than one function, and none of them is a smartness gene.
Okay, but let's say eventually scientists figure out all of the genes that contribute to making a baby smart, and they can engineer all of them flawlessly.
And the human race gets smarter, and that's somehow a bad thing?
It is if only rich people can buy hyper-intelligence for their kids, yeah.
I mean, first of all, intelligence is only partially inherited. You can never guarantee intelligence through genetics. Money, on the other hand, is 100% heritable. So if fairness is your issue, we could start by having a more robust estate tax.
Yeah, but if certain people can engineer the traits of their children, that's going to exacerbate inequalities in our society. It's probably even going to lead to new kinds of inequality, which will then trap us collectively in like a genetics arms race, which could lead to social disruption on a massive scale.
What's a genetics arms race? Is that like when militaries take babies and try to engineer them to make super soldiers? I think Doombots would be a lot more practical, Dr. Doom. Look, DNA is not computer code. You can't just program someone to turn out the way that you want. Even if there were such a thing as an intelligence gene, there are a lot of non-inherited factors that determine how smart people are.
Well, but even if rich people could just statistically bias their children towards hyperintelligence, that would be game-changing.
I doubt it. George W. Bush did not get to be president because he's a super genius.
That's fair.
And there are geniuses growing up right now in neighborhoods like Compton who are going to end up getting shot instead of ever having a chance to become president. Raw intelligence is not the primary factor that determines who's successful in our society. It's probably not even one of the top 10 factors.
All right, what about the issue of playing God then?
And creating artificial intelligence isn't playing God? Look, do you remember Louise Brown, the first test tube baby? People called her Frankenbaby. They said she should be kept in a toilet bowl or a fish tank. The Catholic Church said in vitro fertilization is dehumanizing. To a lot of people, this idea that you could make a human embryo in a tissue culture dish and then implant it into a woman's uterus was completely appalling. And they said the slippery slope was going to lead to designer babies. How do we feel now about IVF? Do you think all those fears and all the calls for a moratorium were really warranted?
I see your point, but just the same, genetic engineering on people can lead to experiments gone wrong. And then what happens if those genetic mistakes sweep through the human populations like wildfire?
There are 4 million babies born every year with genetic disease. I appreciate your concern about adding more man-made genetic disease to the mix, but you need to keep that concern in perspective. There's a possibility of maybe curing some of these diseases. You know, for parents who watch their children suffer and often die because of one single genetic mistake in one single gene, your fear of theoretically introducing an unforeseen genetic change doesn't seem all that scary. And of all of the genetic diseases that already exist in the world, none of them have wiped out humanity yet. There's no reason to think a man-made one would be worse.
All right, what about messing with ecosystems? There's scientists right now working to engineer mosquitoes so that they will transmit no malaria to humans, but they will transmit their genetically engineered genes to their offspring, all of them. What happens if there's a mistake? The mosquitoes die out and huge ecosystems crash as a result.
See, now you're making a slippery slope argument. You're saying if we allow the science to progress, then catastrophic consequences may ensue. Right. You need to keep the consequences in the perspective, both of the probability of them coming about and also the harm that comes from stifling innovation. The loss of species we're seeing on the planet right now is already 1,000 to 10,000 times accelerated by human activities. If we want to protect the environment and rein in technology, we could start by reining in technologies that exist and that we know are hurting the planet, like oil burning and coal burning. I don't see why we're so worried about test tube babies, and we're not worried about heating up the planet until it's only a good environment for mosquitoes to live. There are 1 million people who die every year of malaria. I'm not saying that genetically modified mosquitoes are like a fantastic idea, but we should at least give the technology some serious consideration before we panic and shut it down because of uninformed opinions.
All right, but you could say the same thing for AI, though. The doomsday scenarios are not super likely to happen. And meanwhile, there are all these huge problems that our planet faces that artificial intelligence could help a lot with. Millions of people a year could have their lives saved by applications of artificial intelligence to transportation safety. You just mentioned global warming. In that particular case, we have 3 basic choices. We can hope that somebody makes a magic box that produces fully carbon neutral energy, essentially for free, enough for everybody. It'd be cool, but I wouldn't hold your breath for that one. Number 2, we could, as a species, just use less energy. That's sounds nice in principle, but since that means that we'd have to all have a lower quality of life, that's totally unrealistic. And the third choice is that we find ways to work smarter. That is, to make more and do more and have more with less energy used. Seen from that perspective, since that's going to take smart machines, artificial intelligence might save humanity from global warming.
Well, that just made me think of something. At the current rate the planet's heating up, how long will it be before big parts of it are not really inhabitable by humans?
Best guess is about 300 years.
So let's say we made our first genetically engineered babies today, which we can't do. But let's say we made 1,000 really smart babies, or maybe we made a mistake and we introduced some disease genes. At the current rate that people are multiplying on this planet, in 300 years, there would only be about 35,000 possible carriers of the disease mutation or the smartness gene. Does that really seem like that's going to have some huge impact on the future of humanity?
I don't know if you can say for sure who's going to have a big impact on humanity and who won't. I don't think anyone looked at baby Vladimir Lenin and said, well, that sucker's going to change the lives of 1 billion people. But statistically, no, I grant you, 35,000 people with above average intelligence or with genetic diseases is probably not going to put much of a ripple onto the surface of human history. But the same could be said for AI again. Given the long history of technologies that mankind has created and the huge number of technologies currently under development, the idea that this one technology in short order is going to wipe us all out is a little bit of a stretch.
So maybe we should stop worrying about super babies and focus on some more important problems.
All right, fair enough. Super babies is not a top 10 problem for the world. can we please drop the AI nonsense also? Because of those top 10 problems for the world, the robot apocalypse is none of them.
I guess I know that. It's just easier to tell you to stop making robots than to think about all that other stuff.
I understand, but all the more reason not to slow down progress because of how you feel. Scientific advances are neither innately good or bad. They're just potential tools for advancing human agendas. And some of the biggest problems that our planet faces might best be solved with those technology advances.
Do you think one day we could have good AI like Iron Man's Jarvis?
I hope so. I don't know for sure, though. Do you think someday we could have a real Professor X?
I doubt it, but it would be very cool.
I tell you what, instead of you panicking about Doombots, what if you held out hope for Jarvis? And instead of me spending my time panicking about monster babies, I held out hope for Professor X. The chances aren't super high either way, but at least that way we won't be kept awake at night.
Okay, deal. To Jarvis.
To Professor X, and to comic book writers who express our fears but inspire us to see the goodness that they have seen in the world. Generations of scientists first glimpsed the future huddled under blankets with a stack of comics and a flashlight. For the inspiration those writers have provided, we salute you.